Hello and welcome back to AP World History Modern. Today we're going to look at Unit 6.6, Causes of Migration in an Interconnected World. There are two learning objectives that we need to touch upon for this unit topic. One is explain how various environmental factors contributed to the development of varied patterns of migration from 1740 to 1900, and explain how various economic factors contributed to the development of varied patterns of migration from 1750 to 1900. Right, so really what we're talking about here with migration are these push and pull factors, which can be for a variety of environmental and economic. All right, so as we kind of go through some examples of those, this is what we're going to see. When we and here are the standards. Right, here are the curriculum from the College Board for today. All right, so let's start off by looking at immigration into the United States, since this is probably what my students have the most background with. Right, and just because this is what you're most likely to pick up on when you're in elementary school or in middle school. So this is looking at immigration into the United States and kind of broken into four different time periods. Right, so from 1820 to just shortly after the Civil War in 69, from 1870 up until the end of World War I, and then from 1920 to 69. And then from 1970 to present, or from 2010, I guess. All right, so generally we'll look at this and make some observations, right? So feel free to pause and go ahead and try to make some observations. I'll generally ask a student in class, if you look at immigration into the United States from Europe, during these kind of first three periods, the majority of immigrants who came into the United States were European, right? And then you see a very large drop in the total percentage in immigrants coming in from Europe. Do you believe that would be caused by a change in pull factors, right, in the United States, or a change in push factors from Europe? And explain why, right? I think that's a nice little, way to kind of, are you interpreting this correctly? Do you know what push factors are versus pull factors? All right, so, so if you go ahead and think about that, maybe try to answer that question yourself. Right, so when we go over the answer in class, we, the general answer that kids provide is that the reason for the drop in the percentage of immigrants coming in from Europe is because of a change in push factors in Europe. Right, so so there's not the post 1945 is a relative period of peace in Europe. So, civil war and war itself, which creates refugees, is not a major phenomenon in Europe from the period 1970 to 2010. Yes, you do have in Southeast Europe, you do have the events of Bosnia and Herzegovina in the early 1990s, Kosovo in the late 1990s, but that's it doesn't have a major impact on the kind of overall immigration into the United States. If you get that correct, then I'll generally ask, well, how do you know that it's not a change in pull factors? And students would generally explain that we see an overall increase in immigration into the United States during the period 1970 to 2010. So the fundamental economic pull factors, we can assume that they have not changed, because people are still coming into the United States, right? So the basic pull factors probably still exist, right? And so that's why you're going to see that change. All right, so that's kind of usually how we'll start off looking at this. Then we'll kind of just look at this and maybe draw some conclusions, right, about why this major drop happened when it did. Hopefully you're able to figure that one out, right? 1930s and 1940s, what was going on. All right. Please feel free to email me if you need that question answered. All right. Then we'll break this down as well. So this is still immigrants coming into the United States, and it's broken down by country. In class, we'll kind of do a variety of things with this. We'll look at, kind of this early period here in Europe, where most of the immigrants coming from. And you can see they're from Germany, they're from Ireland, they're from the UK, some decent sized Swiss numbers, French numbers are pretty decent, and draw some conclusions based on the immigrants, the numbers that we just went over versus immigrants coming in from Italy, 9,000, Portugal, 1,000, Poland, 1,000, Spain, 9,000. Why is there a difference, right, in the number of immigrants coming in from these countries? Right, so generally the kids will come up with kids from Northern Europe. Protestant countries are generally favored, as far as where immigrants come from, and that's why you're seeing larger immigrants coming from those places, because their numbers are not being limited by the U.S. government. Right. Also, you can look at this look at Italy, right? Why are we seeing a dramatic jump? Right, so this is Italy right here. Why are we seeing a dramatic jump in immigration starting around 1881? All right, so what's the difference here? Right, so major pull factors at play. In the United States, creating a major demand for additional European immigrants beyond what was coming in from Northern Europe. And of course, this is also a time where we're seeing large immigration of Italians into places like Argentina as well. Right, Brazil and Argentina especially. Right, so on a whole bunch of pull factors, at play there. All right, so we'll kind of look at some of this. We'll also look at China, right? So let's look at the Chinese numbers here. So 41,000 immigrants, 64,000 immigrants, 123,000 immigrants. We're seeing a pretty steady increase. And then the bottom falls out, and we drop back down to 61,000 immigrants from China. So what happens here? And then we're going to drop down to 14,000 immigrants. And that number really never rebounds until we get into after World War II, right? So why is that? Right? Why are we seeing that massive drop? And we haven't kind of got to this, but this is in your next homework. Right, this is around the time of the Chinese Exclusion Act. Right, so Chinese immigration is going to be barred or greatly restricted after 1881. Right, so this is what you're seeing there. Right, so it's kind of interesting to kind of use the data and make sure you're able to to identify like maybe causes of these kinds of changes that you're seeing in the data. Right, so it's always kind of good practice to kind of look through this stuff and and try to identify some like major changes and things, and try to figure out what caused it. All right, now just kind of you can pause it on this if you want, and I'm just gonna move on. All right. So during this era, we're not just seeing migration into the United States. Obviously, we're seeing large scale migration globally. Right, so it's wherever there is pull factors, you're going to see migration. So this is that kind of similar data, just in a different format. So this is that coming from that French, that French source that we've used for infographics for Napoleon's invasion of Russia, and also for cotton production. This looks very similar to the cotton production. Or actually, this might be the cotton production one. I'm sorry. Yeah, this is the migration one. Right, so this is his migration one. So same guy who did this cotton one. This is his immigration infographic. Okay, so feel free to pause and look at this. All right. So obviously we've talked about Queen Loma Kalani before from Hawaii. There's going to be a lot of Chinese and especially Japanese migration into Hawaii as a result of the sugarcane plantations that are coming in. So we're talking about migration, right? For things like plantations, then there is a word that's an important word to be aware of, and that's Kangani. Right, so the Kangani system or Kangani labor system, this is a migration system that places migrants under a debt obligation, very similar to indentured servitude, but generally referring specifically to South Asians and East Asians. All right, so the Kangani system. So what this is, these are numbers looking at immigration from South Asia, so modern day Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, etc. Right, so migrants from South Asia, about 8 million during this period. Right, so from 1846 to about World War II, about 8 million are going to migrate into Malaysia, right, to Malay, to work on the palm oil plantations. About 8 million are going to go to Ceylon or modern day Sri Lanka to work on the tea plantations, really post 1860, in quinine, right? Quinine plantations. So for the cinchona trees, okay. About 15 million South Asians are going to migrate to Burma, largely to work on rice, right? Rice paddies, rice fields. And about 1 million Africans are going to go to, 1 million South Asians are going to move to Africa. A lot are going to go to South Africa to work in the gold mines there. Some are going to go to places like Uganda to work on infrastructure projects, as you see in this image here. So here's some South Asians in working on the Ugandan railway project. All right, from China, right, for the Kangani system, about 2 to 3 million will migrate to French Indochina, modern day Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, largely to work on rice fields, but also later on rubber tree plantations there. Right. So keep in mind, there will be penal colonies. So prison labor is going to become something that becomes part of the migration story as well. Right. So here's a painting depicting some of your penal colonists coming into Fremantle in West Australia. Right. So kind of most well known is Botany Bay, Sydney, on the southeast coast or east coast of Australia. Being established as a penal colony, but also West Australia, right, is going to have its fair share as well. All right. So indentured servitude is going to be another kind of big kind of classification, which I guess we use that word more for Kangani system, but in North America. All right, or Latin America, in this case here, the Caribbean. All right, so we're looking here at some evidence of migration. Right, so this is a census taken of Singapore around 1840, and you're seeing the diversity that exists within Singapore itself. All right, what are causes of long distance migration, right, from 1740 to 1900? So feel free to answer that and email that to me if you are out. All right. What are causes of long distance migration in the period of 1750 to 1900? Right, so once again, feel free to read through this and email me the response if you're out. All right, so causes of long distance migration. Here's some images of long distance migration. All right, so the abolition of the slave trade is going to be a major kind of part of this, right? And we talked about this back when we did. I think this was like topic 5.1, where we talked about migration, right, in the Caribbean especially, after slavery is abolished, right? All right, so types of labor migration. Make sure you're very aware of these kind of basic words, and just so that you're familiar with this. So indentured servitude. Make sure you're aware of what that word means. Imperial recruitment. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Penal colonies, like what we see in Australia, and make sure you're familiar with the word Kangani. All right. As far as demographics, here's just an image to show you where laborers are coming from and where they are going to and why they are going there. right, in some of these cases. Okay. All right, so reasons to leave home. So are these push factors or pull factors? Right, obviously these are push factors, right? So why are so many millions of people from South Asia willing to sign up for the Kangani system? Extreme poverty, famine, realities of colonial rule. How about Chinese? Why are there so many Chinese migrants during this period? Overpopulation, civil war, right? Taiping Rebellion, right? The chaos of, from 1850 to 64 is going to be a massive push factor, right? And of course, the Irish, push factor, the potato famine, right? So from about 1847 till the kind of mid 1850s, right? We're going to see the potato blight, the potato famine. So irregardless of Ireland being a net exporter of grain during this period, the population is not going to have access to that grain because they are a colony of Britain. All right. When we talk about imperial migration, there is definitely a sizable amount of non-labor migrants during this time period. So, British technical engineers, South Asian technical engineers, a lot of British colonists moving, or engineers and colonists moving to Argentina. But anywhere where the British are building railroads, you're gonna have a lot of, British migrants. Technical workers, engineers, and the such. But you also have the educated people within the colonies who are going to be moving as well. Probably the most famous of the non-labor migrant, that we see happening within the empire would be Mahatma Gandhi, right? So, Gandhi himself, was he's from South Asia, but he was educated in England, where he gets his law degree. And then he spends the next decade plus or so working with Kanganis from South Asia in South Africa, in the colony of South Africa. So there's going to be, there will be a lot of non-labor migrants, not just from England, but also from some of these imperial colonies. All right, so in Japanese will also send their non-labor migrants around the world too. There's a sizable amount of Japanese sugarcane plantation workers in Hawaii, but you're also going to see a lot of migration to the United States and Mexico and the such. All right, so go ahead and read this. I'll be right back.
I think I could drop this off to you so I don't mess it up.
All right, so if you're not done reading that, please pause. So is this a push or a pull factor, right? And why? And this would be an excellent thing to send me in an email, right? So is this push or pull, and why? If you're not in class today. All right, so voluntary migrant patterns. So this tells you country of origin, where most went, and gives you some reasons for migrations. All right, so feel free to pause and read through this. And once again, same kind of data sets. Feel free to pause and read through this. All right, so debrief and summary, some key takeaways. The abolition of slavery in the is going to result in the growth of migration from South and East Asia to colonies where plantations produce raw materials and cash crops. All right, so this is where we're going to see these different categories of migrants. And then keep in mind push and pull factors, that influence migration patterns. Okay. All right.